The Baltimore Ravens are heading to Cincinnati as 8.5-point dogs with a 40.5-point over-under. This is Showdown coverage brought to you by SharpFootballAnalysis.com. I'm your host, Adam Wilde. Let's jump into this slate. So we do have Lamar Jackson out for this game, so we will be getting Tyler Huntley. Tyler Huntley did not play last week against the Bengals. Not so sure it was entirely injury-related. If it were the playoffs, we probably would have seen him, but instead we got Anthony Brown, so we don't have a ton to go off of on the Baltimore side of the ball, but we do have a lot to go off on the Bengals side of the ball because the Bengals needed that win. So the Bengals played their starters 100% of the game. Joe Burrow played a full 100% snap share. And the Ravens technically played all their starters too if Huntley was actually injured. However, we've got some weird anomalies like Isaiah Likely playing 83% of the snaps. Probably not something that we can hang our hat on this week. So not a ton that we're going to be able to reference for the Baltimore side of the ball. We will start at the top with Jamar Chase. We've had a lot of Bengals slates this year, so we should have a pretty good feel of it. Jamar Chase usually gets ownership around 33-35%, and that is because he's so much more expensive than his other running mates like Joe Mixon and T. Higgins, who have similar ceilings as Jamar Chase. Maybe not similar ceilings, more so similar median projections. Jamar Chase probably has the highest ceiling, probably the only one that could get to 200 yards. So Jamar Chase still great option for your Joe Burrow stacks, especially since we have so many cheap options on the Baltimore side of the ball that we can just kind of toss in there for whatever Baltimore Ravens you need to play. So definitely like being overweight on Jamar Chase at captain. That brings us to Joe Mixon, who got a bit of a price hike. So Joe Mixon at 10,200 is somebody who, like 2 weeks ago against the Bills, 9,600. So a little bit of a price hike, but same premise. If you are banking on the Bengals not succeeding quite as much, Joe Mixon's an excellent option. Just assuming that maybe they control the game, maybe you're overweight on the Bengals defense. That might be kind of difficult because the Bengals defense will be highly owned, but if the Bengals could get out to quick 2 touchdowns from Joe Mixon and just kind of cruise the rest of the game, then it's going to be difficult for those Joe Burrow lineups to succeed. I did skip Joe Burrow at the top. I'm not used to him being the most expensive. He's 11,400. He's got multiple touchdowns in every game except for 5 this season. And on games where it's a total of 40.5, it's pretty easy for the quarterback to finish in the optimal lineup. Like if Joe Burrow throws for multiple touchdowns, he's the lock for the optimal lineup, at least in the flex. If he throws for 3 or if he hits a 300-yard bonus, he's got a really good case for the optimal captain. So I am planning on being overweight on Joe Burrow at captain. And then you're just going to have to get with some of these cheaper Bengals that we're going to talk about in a minute to kind of make that all work out. Brings us down to T. Higgins at 9,400. T. Higgins is going to be people's preferred options. T. Higgins gets to 45% sometimes just because he is cheaper than Jamar Chase, and he does have a similar medium projection. So we're expecting Jamar Chase to get somewhere like 10, 11 targets, and we're expecting T. Higgins to get something like 8 or 9. So you're really, the price difference correlates with the opportunity share. So it really doesn't make a ton of sense to completely fade Jamar Chase for T. Higgins for the savings because we're not having any problems fitting the lineups that we want to fit this week. The players that you do want to play for Baltimore and Tyler Huntley, Mark Andrews, even J.K. Dobbins, they're so cheap that you're not struggling for money, right? So a healthy dose of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I might limit their exposure together. It does seem like one or the other usually ends up being the ideal player on any slate. So I'll probably bring that exposure down a little bit in 20 max. Maybe say like a rule that has 15% of my lineups, including both of them or something like that. That's definitely in the realm of possibility, but I'm not expecting to be underweight on either Chase or Higgins. Tyler Huntley's an interesting one. He might be the only quarterback of the season that I break my rule for multiple receivers with a quarterback at captain. And I'm not quite sure that I'm going to do that yet because Josh Oliver makes a lot of sense. But Tyler Huntley at captain allows you to play basically just Mark Andrews, who in week 17, when Tyler Huntley and Mark Andrews played together, Andrews accounted for 50% of Tyler Huntley's completions and it's like 78% of his receiving yards. So Mark Andrews had 100 receiving yards, and Tyler Huntley only threw for 130 yards total. Uh, if you're playing Tyler Huntley, you're overweight on Tyler Huntley. I don't even know that I would play a single Tyler Huntley lineup without Mark Andrews, because I don't think it's possible for Huntley to succeed without Mark Andrews, unless maybe he rushes for 2 touchdowns. But he's only rushed for 1 touchdown, even though he's averaging over 8 carries a game in his 5 starts. So I really don't see a path for Tyler Huntley succeeding without Mark Andrews. You can break the rule and put Tyler Huntley at captain with only Mark Andrews, but he's not been quite the rushing threat that we really account for whenever he starts. And you don't really need to break that rule, because, like I said, if you throw Andrews and Josh Oliver in, and then you just play the most expensive Bengals, your lineup still kind of makes up for it. So that's okay too. You're going to give up some medium projection by doing that, but if you want to play Tyler Huntley at captain, that's how I would approach doing it. I think I'm going to have no Tyler Huntley captain exposure as 8.5 point dogs. It just doesn't make a ton of sense for me to throw in Tyler Huntley and Mark Andrews in a 4x2 with the Bengals or something like that. I don't feel it's necessary. J.K. Dobbins is priced at 8,200. That's a decent price for him, but he's playing 50% of the snaps. He did have a season high 17 touches in week 17. He did not play in week 18. We have to assume that if it were a playoff game, he would have played. It didn't mean a lot for the Baltimore Ravens. They didn't really have a chance in the game anyways, so a lot of their starters sat. J.K. Dobbins was one of those, and even Gus Edwards only played, I think, 11% of the snaps. So there was pretty much neither of their starting running backs available in week 18. So we have J.K. Dobbins to go off, week 17 performance to go off of. Yeah, if he's getting 17 touches, and you have to assume with him rested in week 18 that his opportunity share is going to be even higher. Like week 17, he got 50% of the snaps exactly, and that was his season high. We could see that go up even further, because he's been a plus in the rushing game for sure. He's actually been relatively explosive, considering he's coming back from some terrible knee injury. So J.K. Dobbins makes a good bit of sense at 8,200, just because I don't see another player that has a similar floor as him. I don't even know if Mark Andrews has the same floor as J.K. Dobbins, because Mark Andrews is reliant on Tyler Huntley producing, and Tyler Huntley is still injured, even though he is going to be playing in this game. So there's a lot of routes to Mark Andrews not succeeding, but J.K. Dobbins is going to get 17, 18, 19 carries no matter what, right? So you're getting a workhorse running back. And I know that phrase usually goes with running backs that are playing 90% of the snaps, like your Najee Harris from last year or something like that. But if you're getting 17 or 18 carries, who really cares what the snap share is, right? So J.K. Dobbins getting plenty of opportunity. And if you just need a floor from the Baltimore side of the ball, if you feel like your lineup is just predicated on Cincinnati really crushing, and you have enough cheap Cincinnati receivers in there to facilitate paying 8,200 for a member of Baltimore's offense, J.K. Dobbins makes plenty of sense there. And we hit a lot on Mark Andrews already. He's only $400 cheaper than J.K. Dobbins, but that is much cheaper than what we were seeing early in the year with Lamar Jackson. We're talking about Mark Andrews like a $10,400 player. And in week 17 with Tyler Huntley, Mark Andrews finally comes around. Like I said, 100 of Tyler Huntley's 130 passing yards were to Mark Andrews, right? And Mark Andrews caught, I think, 8 passes. So if there's any success on the Baltimore side of the ball, it's going to have to go through Mark Andrews. It's just, do you want to build your lineups around Baltimore having any success, especially since Baltimore's defense has played phenomenal lately, and it's not too hard to squint and see a game where this somehow remains close slash low scoring, and then you're talking about a J.K. Dobbins game, right? So I don't know that there's an instance where Baltimore's up 30 and Tyler Huntley just lets it rip. Honestly, I feel like in the fourth quarter, if we see that the Bengals are up multiple touchdowns, we're still going to be frustrated by the Ravens trying to establish the run. I just really don't see an avenue in which we have a blow up Mark Andrews spot independent of it happening regardless. I don't think there's a game script that's going to force that. Tyler Boyd, we'll talk about Tyler Boyd and Hayden Hurst at the same time. Usually they're in the same price range. Usually they're around 5K. Tyler Boyd was an interesting situation in which, like 2 weeks ago, I feel like it had to do with injury or something like that because Trent Irwin was eating into a ton of Tyler Boyd's snaps. But Tyler Boyd is back up to 73% of the snaps. He had 7 targets last week. He had 2 touchdowns in the last 4 games. One of them didn't count because it was in the Bills game. So he's been plenty involved. 6,400. Makes he and Hurst are like the glue that holds Bengals lineups together every single week. They're going to be low 30s, high 28 in roster percentages, and they're going to help keep that cumulative roster percentage down while still heavily stacking the Bengals. So I wouldn't even mind making a rule to include Tyler Boyd or Hayden Hurst in all your lineups if you were doing 20 max or something like that. Obviously, if you go higher than 20 max, then you probably don't want to do that. But they do make lineups work really well. You can even go with something like, let's do like a Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, Hayden Hurst kind of situation because a lot of people aren't going to want to play both Boyd and Hurst in the lineup because they feel like the floors are low, but really not for cost. Both of them can make value pretty easily, especially if Tyler Boyd gets a touchdown, then you're really cooking there. Gus Edwards, 6,200. We don't really know what's going to happen with his workload because he only played, I think, 11% in week 18, and J.K. Dobbins wasn't playing. So Gus Edwards is going to get the remainder of J.K. Dobbins touches. I'm thinking that J.K. Dobbins gets close to 60% for the first time this year. So that leaves about 40% for Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and the likes. At 6,200, that is steep. I don't know that I can get to Gus Edwards at 6,200. Even in neutral game script, that's going to be tough. But considering they're 8.5 point dogs on the road, I'm not expecting game script to be neutral. So, yes, could Gus Edwards punch one in? Sure, but if I'm playing a backup running back, I much prefer Samaje Perine at 5,600 over Gus Edwards at 6,200. So I'm pretty comfortable just completely omitting Edwards. And if Edwards does work out, well, I would I would just feel okay that I had so much Samaje Perine exposure. Actually, Samaje Perine getting involved in the passing game, Gus Edwards succeeding might help with Samaje Perine. So I don't expect game script to go that way either way. So I don't see how Gus Edwards finds viability, but I guess the point of the matter is Samaje Perine is $600 cheaper and far more viable. So we go down to Perine 5,600. He's getting about 8 carries a game or 8 touches a game, both carries and receptions. That's plenty at 5,200. And something I noted in the article on sharpfootballanalysis.com is that Samaje Perine is being utilized in every facet of the game. He's not somebody that they bring into the game in certain scenarios. He can play on early downs. He can play on late downs. He can play on the goal line. Whenever Joe Mixon needs a break, Samaje Perine's going in. It's not being scripted. It's not like, all right, let's get Samaje Perine in there on these plays so that we can limit his involvement. No, we saw in the Super Bowl last year, he was in on the most pivotal play of the game. He ran the wrong route, and that's not ideal, but he was in on the most pivotal play of the entire season in the Super Bowl. So we kind of know how they feel about Samaje Perine. Cat is out of the bag on playing Samaje Perine at $5,000 and getting really, really low ownership, but you're still probably talking 20-25%. So he's still a viable play to help keep that cumulative roster percentage down for the Bengals. Decent pairing option with the Bengals defense, who are right under him. Joe Mixon, great pairing option with the Bengals defense. I'm definitely interested in Cincinnati onslaughts in this game. I just don't feel like there's anyone on the Ravens that I feel scared to not play. Demarcus Robinson, one of those I'm not scared at all to not play. He does lead the team in snaps for wide receiver, like 63% of the snaps in week 18. He does lead them in targets, but we're talking like 5 targets per game, right? So at 5,000, fine, you are viable at 5,000, but Hayden Hurst is right there at 4,800, who's also going to get 5 targets in a game, who's going to play more snaps than Demarcus Robinson for a better passing offense. So do I really want to force myself into playing Demarcus Robinson at 5,000 when I could just add a player to the Bengals stacks that I want to stack because they're 8.5 point home favorites, much better offense, much more touchdown equity? It doesn't make a whole ton of sense to go Demarcus Robinson when you've got Hayden Hurst right there. And Hayden Hurst's roster percentage is going to be reasonable too. So Demarcus Robinson is going to be around 16 to 18%, but Hayden Hurst is going to be like 23, 24%. So you're not even missing much there. So another Ravens player I've pretty much talked myself out of. He makes sense if you are really trying to stack Tyler Huntley. If you've got a good feel for Tyler Huntley, you think that it's going to be a game where he's going to have to pass more than he'd like because they are 8.5 point road dogs. Then sure, you can sprinkle some Demarcus Robinson, and he is the leading target getter for them. Isaiah Likely is always a super popular option for Baltimore because we do know how athletically inclined he is. He is a phenomenal tight end, especially for a rookie big hit for the Ravens, but his ownership's always a little bit high just because we have seen some really big games out of him. It doesn't help that in week 18 he was targeted, I think, 13 times, had 103 yards. I think he even got a touchdown in that game. But as I said earlier, that was with Anthony Brown. That was with the Ravens not quite playing their full arsenal of players. That was 83% snaps for Likely, which has not. He's usually at half that. He's usually in the 40% range. So did we really just see his breakout in week 18 with all the backups? Probably not. We probably saw Ravens saying, "Hey, we got to play this team again in a week, probably. So let's not show them too much. Let's not get our starters too involved." I doubt that Isaiah Likely's ownership is going to take a hit because of that, right? So people are going to talk themselves into maybe it was a breakout or etc. So if his ownership going to be around 3,000 or something like that, I'll just go Josh Oliver, who's going to play more snaps. Obviously, not as inclined as a receiver. No interest in Kenyon Drake. Very little interest in Sammy Watkins. I would say I'd rather play Sammy Watkins than I'd play Demarcus Robinson, but Sammy Watkins has only played one game with Tyler Huntley. He had 33% of the snaps and he had one catch for 40 yards. So at 2,200, is that fine? Sure. But is Trent Irwin 1,400? Yes. And Trent Irwin's much more likely to get, 3 or 4 targets than Sammy Watkins is. So I'd rather go with Trent Irwin, his snap share went down. He was playing about the same snaps as Tyler Boyd, as I mentioned earlier, and that was super weird. We didn't really know why that was happening, but now it's back down to 20-something%, but it's still going to get 2 to 3 targets at 1,400, plenty viable. And again, harping on, I just want to stack Bengals. So if there's a tie break between a Bengals player and a Ravens player, I'm just going to go with the Ravens or with the Bengals player. So that brings us to Josh Oliver, the last player we're going to talk about at 1,000. Yes, Josh Oliver makes a ton of sense at 1,000. He's had multiple targets in like 5 or 6 games this season. So he definitely has the ability to get 2 to 3 targets at 1,000. And that's what you're asking for at 1,000. You're hoping for a touchdown and you're hoping for 2 to 3 targets. However, he plays for the Ravens and Trent Irwin plays for the Bengals, and that's only $400 on a slate where you're not hurting for $400. So why are you really going to go with Josh Oliver? I just can't bring myself to play. I think 3-3 lineups are going to be so popular, and there's just not much reason. I can talk myself out of every Ravens player for a Bengals player in their price range. So why would I even include 3-3 builds in my player or in my exposures? Probably won't. Probably going to be all 4-2 Cincinnati. Probably a lot of 5-1 Cincinnati. Any slate that you can be overweight on onslaughts, you want to do it, especially when you feel okay about them, because 5-1 onslaughts never get above like 10 to 15% of the field. So if I can be part of that 10 to 15, 20, 30% of the field and be overweight on 5-1 onslaughts, I'm probably going to do that. So I'm probably going to be overweight on the Bengals defense, overweight on Mixon and P. Ryan, etc. So let's build a lineup really quickly, and then we will get out of here for this slate. I'm going to be overweight on Joe Burrow at captain. I feel like I just want to go Joe Burrow at captain and then just get my cumulative roster percentage pretty much as low as I can. So that means I'm going to go Jamar Chase, and then I'm going to go all the way down to Hayden Hurst. Probably going to include Trenton Irwin just to kind of help me out with this lineup in terms of salary. And then that leaves me 7,750 to mess around with, and you can do a whole ton of stuff with this. You could do Bengals defense, and then one of the Ravens players, or you could do 2 Ravens players. What I'm going to do is go J.K. Dobbins and then see what I have left. Bam, there's Tyler Boyd. So I'm probably going to look at Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Hayden Hurst, Trenton Irwin, Tyler Boyd, and J.K. Dobbins. You could also do Mark Andrews in this lineup, so you could put in Mark Andrews. If you go Mark Andrews, you can probably come up. Nah, Tyler Boyd's still the most expensive player you can afford. You could come up from Trenton Irwin and play two receivers. You could do Josh Oliver, Mark Andrews would be a unique one, and that leaves 1,700 on the table. But what you could also do with this is a little more, I guess, not so much unique. It's not going to help your cumulative ownership percentage so much, but people are less inclined to play the running back and quarterback captain lineups. But Joe Mixon has had some decent receiving performances of late, so you could go Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, throw in T. Higgins because I think I'll be equal on Higgins and Chase. Throw in Mark Andrews, go back down to maybe Hayden Hurst. No, that leaves 700. Go down to Trenton Irwin, and you have fourth. That's perfect. So then you can go. McPherson would be fine. You could go Likely. You could go Watkins. So in that scenario, you could run a 4-2 here. So there's a lot that you can do with Joe Burrow at captain, just mixing, matching to try to keep your cumulative ownership percentage down. And like I said, I'm probably not going to stack Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. If it is a low scoring game, I could see that happening. So if you only want to do that 15% of the time, that's totally fine. But I'm just not going to be overweight on lineups that include both of them. But that's going to do it for today's Showdown coverage brought to you by sharpfootballanalysis.com. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, and we will catch y'all next week.